Thank you all for coming. It is really my pleasure today to have the opportunity to introduce Anna Rathmann, who is the executive director of the Jane Goodall Institute. A word of context, we were just joking about it. So I first came to know the Jane Goodall Institute in 2020 when Jane Goodall was awarded the Templeton Prize. I was living in Falls Church, Virginia at the time, and needed to reach out to the Jane Goodall Institute, and did so, and was curious about the fact that they were located in Vienna, Virginia, sharing, as you just said, a parking lot with a used car dealership. And I thought this was very odd. And Anna wasn't there at the time. But anyway, I was able to find some people to talk to. Ended up working out. Ended up having a conversation because of that conversation, because I was a little confused about who to work with at JGI. I ended up reaching out to people at the National Geographic Society, including someone who was a former colleague. They shortly, not too long after that, introduced me to Anna, who has done some amazing things there, and I'll talk about that. But just a word about that context with Jane, a little bit more about that. So of course, Jane won the Templeton Prize. We had a wonderful event in London with her. We ended up having a great event with her in Los Angeles, which unfortunately she got COVID just before that, so she didn't personally appear at it, although as testimony to her star power, we had a number of celebrities who literally rearranged their schedules at the last minute in order to be able to film video on the spot from their homes for Jane, which was a remarkable thing that was accomplished, including Jean Smart, multiple Emmy Award winner, if anybody knows her work. We went on to fund a couple of projects through the National Geographic Society, either directly because of Jane's work or somewhat connected to Jane's work. One that I'll just mention quickly, which not a lot of people know about, is called the Wildlife Intelligences Project. Well, we aren't funding that right now. TWCF is funding it. I hope that maybe we'll fund it eventually. But that's a fantastic project that is funding 3 scientists around the world who are working, as we said, in the spirit of Jane Goodall and in the spirit of the Templeton Prize. And we're excited to see where that project goes. But getting back to the present day and to Anna's work specifically, prior to her time at JGI, she had a long tenure working in programs and mission at the National Geographic Society. That's how she came to JGI. And currently, there are 2 grants funded from the John Templeton Foundation, 2 Roots and Shoots, which is the youth-oriented project that Anna will talk about. And those are funded from our colleagues in CVD. I think they're both amazing. One is a project that gives out awards to youth leaders who are doing particularly amazing things. These are small grants, right? $5,000. And I love that project because it's, of course, empowering young people and helping them to do really interesting things, much of which are ideas that they come up with on their own, right? Yeah. And then also the second project is a 3-year grant, $1.6 million, across 3 African countries. The estimates, this project focuses on building compassionate traits for youth in Africa, and the estimates are that it's reached maybe as many as 1 million young people across the continent. And as some of you may know, Africa has the youngest population in the world, so that's no small thing to be able to be reaching young people across the continent of Africa. And the last thing I'll just say is as I've gotten to know Anna over the last 5 years, I've just been so impressed with her work, her leadership at JGI, as well, of course, as the great work that JGI does around the world. I'm really happy that CVD was able to support, or the John Templeton Foundation was able to support her work through CVD. And I just hope that it's a long relationship, and I look forward to your remarks.
Wow, thank you. Thank you so much. My goodness. Thank you, thank you, thank you. Yeah, I loved listening to you, David, because you're absolutely right. We have this beautiful kind of network that has been developed and evolved, if I can use that word, over the last few years. So I'll start off by saying a big thank you to all of you. Thank you to the Templeton Foundation at large for the support both of Jane as a laureate, but also these programmatic areas. And the Wildlife Intelligence Project, the partnership that we're doing with National Geographic, is beautiful because it builds on one of these seminal things about Jane, which was her discoveries led us to understand that the difference between humans and other animals is really less than we thought they were, and that animals are intelligent, animals have emotions, they have rich social lives. And so that's been a great experience to be able to share that with Geographic. All right, so let me get into this, my remarks here. I've split it up into kind of 3 chapters, and then I'd love to do Q&A. I welcome that, so please, if I say anything or you have any other ideas, would love to do that at the end. But I'm going to talk a little bit about myself, about the Jane Goodall Institute's work, and then about one of the grants that David mentioned earlier that we just wrapped up with Roots and Shoots. So who am I? Anna Rathmann. I have the great pleasure of being the executive director of the Jane Goodall Institute, which means I get to say that Jane Goodall is my boss. And I love that. That's pretty cool. How did I get here? Well, like many of our Roots and Shoots, young people, I was one of these kids. This is me in one of my more memorable Halloween costumes. I love this. I remember making this. My mom made me the cape and this crown situation. I worked on the wand. I was a butterfly princess. That's what I wanted to be. Forget witches and clowns. I wanted to be a butterfly. I was one of those kids that always wanted to be outside. It led me to an opportunity to work with the National Park Service when I was in college as a seasonal park ranger in the first, and I might say the best, national park, Yellowstone National Park. I was a seasonal park ranger. I included this photo not just to prove it, but also because my mom reminded me, I just got this haircut, and she said, Anna, you had that when you were a park ranger. So there we go. The 90s, they're back, guys. They're back. And I still have the hat. It's displayed in our living room here. From the National Park Service, I got an opportunity actually to join National Geographic. I went there and was just afforded extraordinary opportunities to travel the world. This was in Papua New Guinea, meeting people who led these unbelievably rich lives culturally, and it was just a phenomenal experience. From there, I got to travel to Africa quite a bit. I was offered an opportunity to start a nonprofit, a conservation organization in Africa. And our biggest project at that time was called Rhinos Without Borders. It was a translocation of rhinos from South Africa to Botswana. If you're wondering, and the reason for that is because the rhinos at that time had been hunted out of existence in the Okavango Delta, so we were reintroducing them in much the same way that here in the US, we know about the wolf reintroduction that happened in Yellowstone, so we were doing that with rhinos. How do you move rhinos from one country to another? Well, it's a lot of partnerships, a lot of stakeholders. In this instance, we were working with both the South African government and the Botswanan government. They were kind enough to let us use their military aircraft and other resources to move them. This is a mother and a calf on the back of a C-130, which is a cargo plane. It has a carrying capacity of 11 rhinos, for those of you who are curious. You then release them. This rhino, unfortunately, the tranquilizer was not as effective, so he did come out hot. But then, but then working with some of the most extraordinary wildlife professionals in the world and on the African continent, veterinarians and whatnot, we then did sedate the rhinos, had them transported via helicopter. The reason for that is the Okavango Delta is a very marshy environment. So to actually get the rhinos into the areas that we were planning to relocate them to, we couldn't carry them on the trucks. The trucks were struggling to get through. So we actually had to use the helicopter, which also was donated. So here I am out there in Botswana, running around on these sandy, airstrips, chasing after rhinos that are being carried by helicopters. And I get a phone call from this woman. And Jane, of course, I had known about Jane for my entire life. The time at National Geographic, she's had a very long relationship there. And Jane invited me to join her organization. And anybody who's ever had the opportunity, David, to talk with Jane knows that you can't say no to her. She's a very persistent woman. So I said, okay, Jane, the only thing that's going to really make me sad is there are no chimpanzees in Botswana. So, the idea that I have to leave the beautiful Okavango Delta breaks my heart a little bit, but here I am. And what an honor to be working with Jane. Many of you know her from many different contexts. Jane is one of these cultural icons who's really earned it from a life of being a young person, being curious, getting an opportunity from one of her mentors, Leakey, to go into Gombe. The photo at the bottom here, which is one of these iconic photos of Jane looking out into Gombe National Park that's in Western Tanzania. Jane actually took that photo. That's a selfie that she set up, and it's cute when she talks about how she did that. But like I said earlier, Jane's observations really helped blur the lines between humans and other animals. Some of her most profound observations were about tool use. She was one of the first scientists to document the use of tools in non-human species, watching the chimpanzees use grass to fish for termites. And famously, there is the quote of, well, we're either going to have to redefine tool or redefine man, because here we are observing another species using tools. At that time, it was man the tool maker. The use of tools was what was defined humans. So Jane has had a long relationship with National Geographic, has been a wonderful partner sharing these observations with the world. She continues to go on and share them now. I was sharing earlier with some of you. I just left Jane. She was in Detroit. We were in Detroit together. She's headed to Chicago today, speaking to sold out audiences and sharing her messages and her observations about hope and about conservation. I've now had the opportunity to learn from her, to work with her organization. Jane established the Jane Goodall Institute nearly 50 years ago. She did so to continue her research in Gombe National Park. She wanted that to continue uninterrupted. We are very proud this June. We celebrated 65 years of uninterrupted research there. So we're so happy. I'm so impressed by my colleagues daily of the work that's happening in Tanzania. But that's not the only place that the Jane Goodall Institute works. We are a global organization. While I stand here before you in the US, I have colleagues all over the world in 26 chapters of Jane Goodall Institutes in Europe and Africa and Asia and North and South America, obviously North America here with us and my colleagues in Canada. So we are truly a global organization. Our work primarily focuses on conservation efforts and research. That's keeping true in line with how Jane originally started the organization. We approach our work in a holistic manner. Jane talks famously about how her time when she was in the forests of Gombe, were some of the most happiest and enlightening in her life. And one of the reasons for that is she started to see this interconnectedness of life. She'll refer to it as the tapestry of life, and how each thread is connected to one another. You remove one and the tapestry will hold, but when you start to remove too many, that tapestry comes in tatters. And Jane realized that in order to protect these extraordinary biodiversity of this area, humans were a big part of that. So Jane's work working with communities is really central to everything we do. We have a program that we refer to as TACARE. It's an acronym, or we say to take care. And it's really about a deep listening exercise that we do with communities, working with them to integrate scientific knowledge with local knowledge, putting decision-making tools into the hands of local communities, and ensuring that they are really in the driver's seat about the outcomes, the conservation outcomes. This started in Tanzania, and we're very happy to say that it is spreading across our portfolio of work, which takes place, our main project focuses span the African continent. We like to say anywhere that wild chimpanzees are found, you can find the Jane Goodall Institute, but the Republic of Congo, the Democratic Republic of Congo, Uganda, and Tanzania are where we primarily have our project investments. This is a group, this is a very common scene when Jane is in Africa or when our teams are in Africa, and it's meeting with the local communities who are our partners. It's a lot of listening, a lot of sharing. It's a beautiful experience of fellowship. And, I just share this. This was a women's co-op who we have been partnering with for the last several decades. Um, we did have a partnership with USAID that was a part of this, and that was a really beautiful thing. I can talk more about that later. Obviously, that dynamic has changed significantly. But Jane famously says, and she feels it in her core, that every individual makes a difference and every individual has a role to play. And that is something that she so profoundly believes, and that message that she shares with everyone, that everyone can make a difference. None of us are immune from that tapestry of life. And Jane talks about when she left the forests of Gombe, when she was starting to transition away from being a researcher into more of an advocate, she started meeting with more and more young people. And these young people were expressing feelings of apathy, of depression, of feeling like their futures were being stolen from them by the loss of environment, by economic conditions. And Jane talked with them. And from those conversations, she started a program that David mentioned earlier. And I always say the truest and fastest way to Jane's heart is through her Roots and Shoots program. And this photo is of the original group that famously met on Jane's patio in Dar es Salaam, Tanzania. And they were the ones who started Roots and Shoots over 30 years ago. And at the end of this meeting, and they decided to go out and make these positive impacts for their communities, for people, other animals, and the planet. At the end of it, Jane said, okay, they're kind of wrapping up. And she says, all right, well, are we going to do this? And they said, yeah, we'll do this. And she said, no, that's not good enough. I said, okay, well, how about together we will do this? And she said, yeah, that's okay. How about together we must? So she often will close her lectures saying, together we can, together we will, and together we must. And that kind of rallying cry of bringing everyone together to make these positive impacts is a thread that has run through since the early days of the founding of Roots and Shoots. Roots and Shoots operates in over 75 countries that we know of around the world. It truly has grown from that one small group in Tanzania to be an international phenomenon. Wherever Jane is in the world, she likes to make sure that she meets with her Roots and Shoots members and learn about their programs. It's a beautiful, beautiful example of something that Jane feels very strongly about, which is fostering hope. And she talks about Roots and Shoots as being the antidote to that apathy and desperation and depression that she was hearing from so many young people. Yeah, that is our work in a nutshell. Is we're really looking to, at the Jane Goodall Institute, first of all, continue the research that Jane started 65 years ago to ensure that the communities and that the environments around the research and throughout Africa are being supported. And the conservation work is a big part of that. And then the Roots and Shoots program is this third pillar. So working with young people. And that is where the Templeton Foundation comes in the talk here. This is the grant that we just wrapped up. I think it just finished. It was a 3-year grant about growing, you can see the title there, Growing Youth Purpose and Compassionate Action in Africa through Roots and Shoots. It is part of this character through community narratives. And so looking to ensure that young people are given tools to develop character traits. So the way in which we did this, the methodology was working with, there's a national Roots and Shoots coordinator in each of the countries where we are focused, then developed what we're calling a community of practice. As the name suggests, it involved many other coordinators and other team members. Then there's a national network, and then of course the Roots and Shoots youth. The key questions. So as we're looking at the young people who are part of Roots and Shoots, we want to make sure that their participation is actually moving the needle in these different character attributes. And also how is it building connection to the community, to one another, and studying that and looking at it, because it's one thing to say, isn't this great? We all come together, we feel better, but what does that actually mean? What does that look like, and how does it move the needle? So after 3 years of this Roots and Shoots community of practice, we are so proud to say that we are very happy with the outcomes. I'm going to share that from our research partners at the University of Mississippi. But the objectives of the grant were about building a sense of community, unifying the foundation of the Roots and Shoots model, and then sharing lessons learned and best practices. We had 25 community of practice meetings. Those were virtual meetings. We included professional sessions where we had guest speakers come and present and talk about ways in which to build community, to engage community. So offering a lot of strong professional development. We had 2 in-person meetings as part of the grant, which were wonderful because, as we all know, that in-person is such at a premium, but when you do come together, there's magic. One was in Dar es Salaam, so in Tanzania in 2023, and then we had a follow-up one also in Tanzania in Zanzibar in 2024, where we have some thriving Roots and Shoots communities. Why it was particularly poignant or sentimental to have the meeting in Dar es Salaam, that's where Roots and Shoots started. So to be able to go back there and have these meetings there and really reflect on the origin story was really powerful. One of the key tenets of the programmatic work was around photo voice. This is where we encouraged young people to go out into their communities, to take photos, to report back on them, discuss of how they can, whatever they were showing, how that could improve their communities, how they could get engaged, why that's important, why that's significant and relevant to us, seeing it through the young people's eyes, seeing what they're noticing. Us as we are not necessarily a part of that community day in and day out. What is it that they're walking past on their way to school? What is it that they see as they could make a positive impact? It was extraordinary to see the outcomes of this. Community mapping. This is where our conservation science colleagues came and were a part of it. Again, getting people familiar with their communities through these mapping exercises and learning about how they use their communities, what different aspects of their communities matter to them or that they're noticing, and then how they can be a part of protecting and growing that community. So that was, and it was great too. Our conservation science team can get very technical. They are all GIS, satellite imagery technology specialists, so they can go down some rabbit holes. And when I present on their things, I'm saying words I don't know the meaning of, like synthetic aperture radar. I still don't know what that is. But to have them working with these young people through Roots and Shoots was just beautiful because it's also showing some other career paths and other industries that young people can be a part of. So that was really special. And then the development of this volunteer toolkit. This is something that we hear time and time again with Roots and Shoots. It's a grassroots program, but people do want tools. So when they are inspired, when Jane gets them inspired or one of my colleagues, they want to have a way in which they can follow on and take action. So the development of the volunteer toolkit was really critical to this. One of the highlights I wanted to share from this grant from the Templeton Foundation, thank you, was that when we were doing our follow-up research and the intervention survey, we found that 100% of the community of practice members reported an increased sense of community. That's beautiful. Everyone, I mean, that's everyone, for heaven's sakes, you know, no margin of error here, but they all felt that support from one another. They felt strengthened by it. And that's significant. And the ripple effects from that are profound. Our research partners at the next couple of slides here, I took directly from our research partners at the University of Mississippi to share with you today. They were who came in and tested us against our hypotheses. So the results of this 3-year mixed method study of the Roots and Shoots, PYD is Positive Youth Development. You're going to see that acronym throughout this. Roots and Shoots is a positive youth development program. Yes, it is. The outcomes of this across, oh goodness, I think I lost the title there. Yes, this title here is How Does the Roots and Shoots Impact Youth? How they learned. How they learned, yes. So you can see here, what's really interesting is that these interactions through Roots and Shoots were actually affecting how the students were learning. The hands-on experiences of it had these very positive gains, which of course, education in all its forms is critical to us as we're thinking about this. See how the key developments in relationships, Jane talks about this all the time. When Jane talks about Roots and Shoots, she is very key on that it is building relationships with one another, with your environment, with your community. So the fact that the relationships also showed all of these positive gains, were really proving a theory or a hunch or a sense that Jane has always felt and professed. And then its impact on the character virtues. This was what we set out to do, especially around compassionate youth traits and civic action, purpose, a sense of purpose. Again, counterbalancing what Jane was describing when she founded it, that sense of apathy. So in all of that, we were very positively impressed with the outcomes over such a short period of time, just 3 years. And finally, some of the closing remarks, and this came from our partners at the University of Mississippi, that we really appreciated hearing was, again, coming back to this emphasis on relationships with one another. And that the folks who participated in this Roots and Shoots community of practice left there knowing that they have a community that they can reach out to, an international community across Africa and in the US. Of course, we were a part of that they can learn from and continue to nurture and continue these ripple effects, not just in that 3-year period. So we were so positively impressed with what we were able to do together. Thank you, Templeton, for being a part of this. And as David said, when we got into the numbers, we estimate that it was between 700 and 800,000 youth were engaged over this 3-year period. Which to us, we feel is a win, because we know that for each one of those, it's just going out further and really changing lives.